Hi guys, welcome back to the channel, and today I am making some fairies, but the slightly deader version of them because we're coming up to spooky month, so now's the time to be making dead fairies. I'm going to start with pulling like this cheap frame that I bought from the range. I will leave a link in the description for all the materials that I use. I'm going to keep the glass front, the glass front bit, and I'm going to use that to sculpt on. It's a great way to stop me from making my fairies too big because I am renowned for doing it. So we're going to start by making a teeny tiny skull. I have to admit I am not comfortable sculpting at such a small size. I've really got to stop doing these teeny tiny things and work on something a little bit bigger. After I've got the general shape of my skull, I'm going to add on like the teeny tiny teeth separately. I did originally do like what most people would do and sort of, I don't know, jam in a line and then loads of other little lines to make teeth, and it just looked very, very cartoony. So I wanted to try a little bit more realism, but obviously at the same time, these are fantasy creatures and they don't need to look realistic at all. Hence the reason why he still doesn't look very realistic. Yeah, I don't know what I was going for, but this is the method that I used. I just added the teeth and then created like a tooth gum line. I don't know if that makes sense. But that's what I did. And then I went on to make these teeny tiny ears, which in hindsight, I have never seen bones in ears. It's fine, it's a fairy. They have different anatomy. I wanted to sound all intelligent and tell you that I made this trapezoid and then pulled his neck from the top of the trapezoid, and then I realised that I didn't actually know what the shape was that I had made and I had to Google it. So I'm not going to sound intelligent. I made like a weird oblongy triangle and pulled his neck out. I wanted to give him like a really emaciated look, so I decided to have like an exposed spine. But watching back this video now, I now realise that his spine is bloody massive. He could hold up an elephant with that. Well, it doesn't matter. Once again, it's a fantasy creature and you can make it look however you want because it's come out of my imagination. It doesn't have to be perfect. There are times like these where I watch my playback and think, I'm so glad that I am cheap, because if that had been a very expensive knife, I'd be losing a finger. Please don't do that. But if you're going to make tiny details, don't make them on your thumb with a very sharp blade. Off screen, I made a ton of these teeny tiny twiggy things and then pre-baked them, and then I went on to make a teeny tiny twiggy crown. I did that by literally, to begin with, just jamming them into his head, which then I realised I was squashing everything that I'd already made, so I started making like these tiny pinholes to put them in, and then I accidentally ripped his head off, so I feel like he had a worse time of it than me. Here I am cutting the lengths that I'm going to use for his forearms, although I'm not going to go on to use them just to confuse you all. Instead I'm going to do his crown because I have the attention span of a child and I can't concentrate on 2 seconds worth of work. I do eventually go on to use those bits for his arms, but instead I went and finished his crown and then started on his hips because that made sense to me watching it back. Oh, there we go. I'm now going to make his arms. To do that, I'm literally just using these tiny thin bits of clay and using the elbow and his chest to prop up the clay. It stayed nice and steady in the oven, so thankfully I didn't need to use any armature. But if you were using it for like a freestanding model, you definitely would need armature. Then I googled what the human hand looked like without skin. And then tried to replicate that. There are a lot of teeny tiny bones, so I just kind of made them up as I was going along in the end. Now, I'm not going to lie, there is an awful lot of bone making in this video, and in order to make bones look like bones, at some point or another, they look like something else. So let's not be childish. And let's just all get over it now. Yes, I know what they look like. They look like bones. After a bit of blending, they no longer look like what you were thinking. So I was being a bit lazy here because I didn't want to sculpt more leg. So I decided to just sculpt one leg because he's a dead fairy, so he can have missing limbs. It's completely normal. Limbs go missing all the time when you're dead. So he's just got the one leg. Although, yeah, I completely wanted to avoid making the teeny tiny bones of the foot, so they are all wearing shoes. Everybody's wearing shoes because that is a great way to not have to do teeny tiny foot bones. After I finished giving His Royal Highness a little bit of dignity and covering up all of his necessities, it was time to make his queen, which is pretty much exactly the same way I made him, except from I was a bit lazier. I didn't want to sculpt her face. Well, actually, I didn't want to sculpt her jaw. So I decided to make her a rogue-like queen by giving her a face mask. It has nothing to do with the fact that I'm an extraordinarily lazy sculptor. So you may notice that her skirt here is a slightly different colour clay, and that's because I've used cosclay as like a base for her skirt. It's just going to make it a lot easier for me to get her off of this bit of glass once she's been baked. She needed something a little bit more sturdy to hold her in. This one I actually gave 2 legs. I must have woke up that day and thought, do you know what? Today's the day where I'm not going to be lazy. I've lazied so far all the way through this video. So I guess I just decided to give her 2 legs. Still didn't give her little tiny bone feet though. She was getting boots. Here I am just making like the details for the top of the dress, which you're not going to see because I'm going to completely hide it with her arms anyway, but I did exactly the same thing to the king. I literally made these beautiful buckles and then covered them all up with his bony arms. For her, I wanted to give her, I don't know, like this, I don't know, sorceress vibe. So I wanted to give her like a little belt with pockets and potions and that sort of thing. So I made these tiny little bags and a little potion bottle, just to give her, I don't know, that little magic-y feel to her without being too Tinkerbellish. Would just like to say that this is the perfectly safe way to be cutting out tiny little details rather than using your finger. After I added in like the last little bits of details to her dress, I then put these two guys into the oven for the full time to bake, and then I left them to cool down and moved on to my resin. Once again, I'll leave a link in the description for the resin that I used, but first I started by tracing my wings, so it made it a lot easier for me to just sort of put my two little sculptures down onto the page and then draw their wings around them and then create their wings that way. That way I once again was not going to make these gigantic wings that would not fit in their frame. Having said that, I did this in two different methods. For the king's wings, I decided to try and do them like individually, and for the queen's wings I did them all as one giant set of wings. And I have to say the king's wings took a lot longer to make, but they were better. So if I was going to do this again, I would do her wings exactly the same way. I'm using one of my sculpting dotting tools, one that I don't use very often, and I'm just literally going to trace the lines of my wing using my UV resin. Once I've got a complete wing, I then go to cure that just basic outline, and then I covered that in like some mica powder, which I just sort of brushed on using one of my paint brushes, and then I cleared it all down afterwards so that it was nice and shiny. And then I added in my resin again round the edges, using a little bit of alcohol ink to dye the bits in between. This method really worked for me, and it made a very nice little delicate wing. So if you're looking to make tiny thin wings, try and say that when you've had a few drinks. This is probably a really good method for you. Once these wings had been sat under the UV light for at least, I don't know, probably a good 6 minutes, because I'm a little overcautious, I very gently peeled them off because I was very frightened that I was going to tear them. But they came off quite easily actually. I thought I was going to have a little bit more resistance. Then I trimmed them down using the world's crappiest pair of scissors because I can't find my good pair. I don't know what I've done with them, and it's made me very sad. And then I popped him on just to make sure that he looked good, because I wanted him to look good. Then I made her wings slightly different. I used a little bit of holographic paper, because I don't know, I just didn't want to do another 8 hours of wing making, I think. And once again, this is why you shouldn't rush the process, because his wings are so much better than hers. But generally it's the same principle. I did exactly the same things I did with his, except from I did it all as one piece. For some strange reason, my brain went, her wings are not shiny enough. Let's crack out the herpes of the craft world. Let's get the glitter out and make it even shinier. I don't know why I thought that. I absolutely loathe using glitter. It literally gets everywhere. But I did. And then I went on to use the world's crappiest scissors again to cut them out. After I'd finished making their wings, it was then on to painting. I am using Vallejo Model Air paints, and I think a couple of them, like my Peebo paints and my Arteza paints, but generally it was more my Model Air paints, to paint them up, make them all regal looking and dead looking. After I finished painting in all of the lovely little details, I then decided to pop down to my local store, to the Halloween section, and I found the Christmas section right next door. So I decided to use the world's crappiest scissors once again to cut up a lovely stocking from the Christmas display. I'm just ridding the Christmas display that it should not be there over Halloween. I'm doing my bit for all us Halloween lovers that want a Halloween aisle not a Halloween and Christmas aisle. And then I put all of my frames together. Now, a smart person would have gone, I need to paint that frame, so I'm not going to put it together yet, but I'm not a smart person, so I literally glued everything in, and then I painted my frame to make my life difficult, you know, because I have to do it at least once in my day. Once I've finished adding in all of the tiny little details, I can finally say that Queen Mab and King Oberon are finished. I hope you have thoroughly enjoyed watching this video. I've kind of really enjoyed making it. So if you did, you know, please do send me a like or make a comment. Or if you're new here, definitely subscribe, because I have lots of weird and wonderful ideas and I look forward to sharing them all with you all. So yeah, hopefully I will see you soon, guys, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye!